Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. I'm Ann Klopp from the American Brachytherapy Society. We're very, very happy to welcome today Dr. Merrick. He will be talking about the narrow door of success, focusing today on leadership. He is a past president, a fellow of the American Brachytherapy Society. And today's seminar is part of a two-part series. So if you haven't had a chance to register yet for the second part, you will certainly want to. So go ahead and get that settled. That is on October 7th. We have a few reminders from the ABS that we just wanted to share with everybody who's listening. There's a symposia on LDR brachytherapy for prostate cancer on October 21st at 4 p.m. Eastern. Martin King, along with Juanita Crook, Pete Oreo, Mira Keys, and Pete Rossi will be reviewing a recent brachytherapy publication, low-dose rate brachy for primary treatment of localized prostate cancer. We had a very successful prostate workshop in August. And the meeting had both a virtual and an in-person component to it. And the entire meeting was recorded and it's available to watch on demand. So on the website, click events and go to the prostate workshop and you can view and purchase these recordings. We are excited about our partnership with the Grand Rounds of Urology, where we have a new course on prostate brachytherapy. There are close to 30 lectures on long-term treatment outcomes, toxicity, socioeconomic issues, training, new developments, and it's organized into 3 modules. It's available online, also through americanbrachytherapy.org. Finally, we have our annual conference in Denver. It's going to be at the Gaylord Rockies, and it is June 17th to the 19th. So I hope many of you will plan for that too. So now to introduce Dr. Merrick. Dr. Merrick is the director of the Urologic Institute at The Ohio University School of Medicine. He has published extensively on all aspects of prostate cancer, including biopsies, surveillance, definitive treatment approach, outcome and complications. He is the past president and the chairman of ABS, and we're so honored to have him here today to talk with us. So I will turn it over to him. Thank you, Dr. Merrick.
Thank you, Dr. Klopp. It's my honor to have the opportunity to speak with everyone today and again next week. In part, I was invited to deliver these 2 webinars because of a presentation I had delivered at the 2019 ABS meeting in Miami entitled The Narrow Door of Success. That lecture has been published in Brachytherapy in January 2020, and it's there for your perusal if you deem interested. I'm not going to repeat that talk today, but I do want to hit on some high points that I think will set the table for today and for next week. I hope that we all could agree that brachytherapy prostate brachytherapy is an efficacious treatment modality that has cure rates as high as our competing modalities, and in my opinion, when done well, has superior outcomes. We have a favorable quality of life, even before hydrogel spacers, serious rectal complications had pretty much disappeared. Urinary function has always been favorable, strictures being our main problem, and my expectation is that the next round of morbidity papers will demonstrate a substantial decrease in strictures as we have a better understanding of anatomy and the importance of dose distributions. Erectile function, we preserve it 55% of the time. I don't expect we're going to get better. I think that's a plateau. No definitive prostate cancer treatment was devised to preserve erectile function, and I think we're doing pretty well compared to others, and Viagra and Cialis bail us out when need be. So the question becomes, why, because of this such effective treatment, is prostate brachytherapy dwindling? Peter Oreo and his group reported a few years ago that in both academic and community settings, prostate volume for brachytherapy had substantially decreased. Well, there's been a lot of purported causes, and this is a slide from that 2019 lecture, and I'm not going to go through all of this, but I want to hit just a couple of points. Number one is active surveillance. We shouldn't be treating patients that don't need to be treated. So if we lose those, we lose those. I believe I stopped treating low-risk prostate cancer about 9 years ago, and over the past few years, we have strongly offered active surveillance to select favorable intermediate risk patients. But some of the things here that were potentially important was robotic prostatectomy. It was touted as a highly effective treatment, minimal morbidity. And we lost a lot of patients to prostatectomy. We now know that shine is pretty much faded. And basically what we get with robotics is about what we got with radical retropubic. But the two important things on here are the Philadelphia VA incident. And for those of you who recall, we had the media attention. We were on the front page, but we didn't answer as leaders. We let it slide. We hoped that it would just go away. You often hear politicians say, never let a crisis go to waste. We let a crisis go to waste. The Philly problem was not an indictment of brachytherapy. It was an indictment of bad brachytherapy. Any procedure done poorly almost always will give you poor results. This was an opportunity for us to stand up while we had the media's attention and talk about why we're the best treatment, who we are, what we bring to the table. And if that ever happens again, hopefully we've learned our lesson and we will be there. And maybe most importantly on this slide are decreased training opportunities. Our residency programs have failed our young physicians by failing to incorporate robust brachytherapy as part of the training program. Dan Peterwright and the ABS are launching 310, and hopefully that will help solve the problem. But it still would be nice to see our academic centers step up, because that's still the most important solution. So what, in my opinion, is the most important component for this decline in brachytherapy? And in my opinion, it's each and every one of us. We failed. For those of you who were around in the 90s, we were the new kid on the block. Everything was fun. We got our table, or we got our seat at the prostate cancer table. But as our data began to mature, we were lashed out at by urology and other competing modalities, as you would expect. They wanted to hold us to higher standards, to ask us additional questions. And we folded. We didn't answer the bell. We began to apologize for who we are. You should never apologize for who you are under any circumstances. We allowed the narrative to be read that, well, we don't have enough follow-up. Younger patients are better treated with prostatectomy. We knew those assertions weren't true, but we said nothing. It's time that we act as one and begin to step up. Individually, we've done great. This field has so many bright people who work so hard and have done such a marvelous job to refine this procedure, to publish their results. But as a group, we've been horrendous. And I think that's most evident when you come to our annual meetings. We focus too much on minutia instead of the big picture. I can't tell you how many times I've heard arguments that this group's 92% success rate is better than another group's 90% success rate. It's ridiculous. We have to focus on the big picture. You don't see urologists doing that to one another. We also spent too much time on self-promotion. How do you integrate supplemental beam into brachytherapy? What brachytherapy procedure is the best? What's the role of ADT? Those are all very important questions. We just didn't have the answers. We pretended that we did. We're not a big specialty. We'll never be a big specialty. We don't have deep pockets. We'll never have deep pockets. But I firmly believe that we can become relevant and move to the front of the line and secure our seat at that table. But it's going to require us to work harder, to work smarter, to trust the process, and to act as one. And that leads us into today's talk, where I'm going to focus on leadership. Now, next week, I'm going to talk more about team building, burnout, and things along those lines. But today we'll focus in pretty deep detail on leadership. A good place to start is this slide. How you start is how you finish. And I can't tell you how many of my talks start with this slide, because I think it's that important. We all know people who say, I can turn it on anytime I want. It's not how you start. It's the finish that counts. No question. We have to finish strong. We want to finish strong. But how you start is how you finish. There are no shortcuts. You have to attack this from the beginning. The very first time that you do anything in life is the most important. Because even with that single rep, our brain begins to wire the circuitry to remember what we just did. Psychologists have debated for years, can you unlearn bad habits or should you learn new habits? This is important. And this is why it's very, very important early on to pay very close attention to details. Because if you learn to do this wrong, you're just going to get good at being wrong. It's also, I think, a way to help pick your team. Never in any endeavor I've been involved with have I ever wanted to be a teammate who thought you could cut corners, who thought you could flip on the switch anytime you wanted, who didn't buy into how you start is how you finish. Because I have found those people to be selfish, to be lazy, to be egocentric. And those qualities are deleterious to individual development, and they're disastrous for team unity. So it is important that as you put your team together, you start to look at who's going to fit in with what you think is important. And how you start is how you finish, no exceptions. Now, there are no bad teams, only bad leaders. And this comes from the Navy SEALs. They had a marvelous and very interesting example. When you go to training to become a SEAL, they break the class down into groups of 6, 5, and then 1 designated leader. And every drill is competition. Everything is scored. There is a winner, there is a loser. And in one class in San Diego, it became particularly evident that there was one team that was just dominant. They won every event and they won them convincingly. But that wasn't the problem. The problem was there was a team that lost everyone. Lost every competition, every event, and they just didn't lose. They lost so badly that the group of leaders, the instructors, thought, well, maybe we should just send these guys home. Maybe we should cut our losses and bring it to an end. They came up with a different avenue. They said, let's take this leader on this team that's winning every single event and put it on this worst team. And let's take the leader from the worst team and put it on this great team and see what happens. In a very short period of time, that team that was so far out, so far lost, that was actually hurting the training because they were holding up, moving from drill to drill, they were so slow, began to win. And they became the best group in that class. How did the team do that lost the great leader and got the bad leader? They finished second. They still did pretty well. And that's also what leaders do. Leaders inspire, they teach, they put their people in a position that they can be successful even when the leader is not there. So I firmly believe there are no bad teams, there are only bad leaders. We blame the team way too much. So leaders are stewards of the future. They've accepted responsibility to add to the legacy. They realize that you have to control the controllable and stay in the present. And we have to start here with a foundation. You can't build a building starting on the 2nd floor. You can't build a team or anything without having a foundation. And to me, I've called our foundation ACDC. ACDC. A is accountability. You have to be accountable to yourself, your team, each other, and hold everyone accountable. Accountability increases learning. You learn faster. You pay attention to details. Communication is the C. Communication just doesn't mean what I'm doing talking. More importantly, it's listening. That doesn't mean that leaders don't talk. Some leaders talk more than others. But you have to have your ears open. You have to be listening to what your team say. Accountability and communication builds trust. Without trust, there's nothing in life, whether it's your family, your business, a sports team, everything comes back to trust. Trust generates commitment. Commitment fosters teamwork. Teamwork delivers results. The D in this is discipline, and discipline is not punishment. Your kids often think it is, but it's not. Discipline is a focus to always do the right thing. And discipline is a higher, excuse me, discipline is a higher form of intellect. Studies have shown that college students' GPA is more closely related to discipline than IQ. In any endeavor I've ever been involved with in my life, I will take a disciplined person over a talented person any day of the week. And the last C is commitment. And commitment is a full-time job. It's black and white. There's no gray. You're either with us or you're not. You can't be committed 85% of the time. It is a full-time job. There's no expiration date. But if you can build your foundation on ACDC, now you have a chance to develop a great team. So leaders understand they build relationships, and everything in life comes down to relationship. Very important. And there's an old saying, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And that's what leaders have to do. They have to care. Their team has to know that this guy, this woman has my back. They serve others. Leaders lead by serving others. It flows down. It doesn't flow up. Your team's not there for you. You're there for them. You have to be humble, resilient, and lead from the front and the back. And what I mean by that is very often at times, the leader needs to be in the front row. He needs to be setting the direction, setting the pace. But once you have a great team, very often you're most effective by leading from the back. You're like that shepherd with his herd. Let your junior leaders, let your team show what they've learned to do. Let them shine. And when someone gets a little off track, you just bump them back into the herd. But you have to lead from the front and the back. And it's very important that you catch others winning. Catch others winning. It's always easy for us to talk to people about, hey, you messed up this, you didn't do this, you dropped the ball. But find times that you can catch people winning when they've done something great. How do you know that someone needs encouragement? If they're breathing, they need encouragement. The power and the influence that we have over one another is enormous. And one of the things that I found helpful is knowing not only the people that are directly in your department, but do you know the people who clean your department? Do you know their names? Do you know who they are, what they do? When you're in your office in the evenings, if your department is spotless, do you ever take the time, because you should, and tell those cleaning people, wow, I am so happy and proud of what you've done. And I hope that you understand how important your job is in the success of what we do in treating patients. The first thing that patients note when they walk through the door is the place clean. The second thing they note is the receptionist. Is she friendly? Does she smile? Is she helpful? Is she knowledgeable? Because if it's clean and the receptionist is on her game, we've soothed out a lot of problems right from the start. I also will tell you, if you tell these cleaning people that department's going to be even cleaner than it was before. People will rise to the occasion. And on top of it, if things falter, if they don't do exactly what they need to do, and you go back, now you have a relationship. Now you have time, hey, you did a great job, but things aren't quite where we need to be. So catch others winning. Humility is being part of something bigger and more important than you. You don't have all of the answers. You're a lifelong learner. And humility, you grow it in a department by being generous. Generous with your time, your effort, your interest to build those relationships. Develop a tone in your department of it's always better to give than to take. And as a leader, always give much more than you take. So leadership is a journey. Just because you're named the chairman of the department, it's not over. It's a destination. It requires you to begin to, it requires you to begin to serve others. And you have to understand, as the leader of a department or of any organization, you eat last. Everybody else has to be taken care of. All the junior faculty, your nurses, your therapists, everybody has to be taken care of first. You eat last. That's your job. And you also have to remember, it's not what you preach, it's what you tolerate. You know, talk is cheap, but you have to maintain what those standards are. You have to develop empathy, selflessness, be authentic, accountable, commitment. And you have to be decisive. That doesn't mean you make rash judgments or decisions, but nothing will erode the confidence that your team has in you if you can't make decisions. And those decisions sometimes are hard and sometimes they hurt, but you have to make decisions. You have to be decisive. So leaders never can be satisfied, never. There's no ceiling on improvement. No matter how good you are, you can get better. For those of you who are basketball fans, Kobe Bryant in 2012 was the greatest player in the world, hands down. He was a guard. He spent that summer working with a center, Akeem Olajuwon, to learn how to play out of the post. He wasn't satisfied. The next summer, he spent the entire summer watching film of Jerry West, a player from the 1960s. He was willing to steal from others to further improve what he does. You don't have to reinvent the wheel every single time. Steal from high performers, but never be satisfied. Always be willing to push. You need realistic, brutally honest assessments with your team. The next slide is going to be a quote. And the quote says, if you want to help somebody, you'll tell them the truth. If you want to help yourself, you'll tell them what they want to hear. Your door must always be open to any person on your team, but they have to understand that they're going to get an honest assessment, an honest answer. They may not leave happy because of it, but that's how you develop trust, you develop team. ID weaknesses, plan corrective solutions. From our very first implant, we've always done day zero dosimetry. And we did that because I'm in the operating room that day, I contour it that evening. The next morning, dosimetry has it on my desk. We can tie up and make corrective plans very, very quickly. Okay, this is the quote. We'll go by that. So leaders must have a philosophy. Mine is the 4 R's. We're going to talk about that next week, but decide what's important to you. You can't have 35 things on your list. There can only be a couple of things that are important, but have a philosophy where you want your program to go. Build on a positive vision. Too often we try to build negatively. Regardless of what your opinion is of the vaccine mandates, the problem is it's negative. There's nothing that's delivered in a positive fashion. Positive people, positive messages, and improve your competitiveness in any market. Leaders must emphasize details. How you start is how you finish. We're going to talk next week about concepts of learning, of training, of the ABCs of learning. Immediate and continuous feedback. How many times are we busy and somebody, a nurse, a resident, a physician, a therapist, does something that's not quite right? You say, you know what? I'm going to let that slide. We'll talk about it later. Maybe it won't happen again. Don't do that. Immediate and continuous feedback. The next slide is another quote. Never pass up a teaching moment. You may never get it again. At least you'll never get it again in that immediate situation. And there's nothing that helps people learn and get better by immediate feedback. Be a model of consistency, integrity, discipline, and hard focused work. Quote. Okay, so leaders, they passionately protest mediocrity. How many times have you heard someone say, it's good enough, it's close enough? Don't ever give that message to your team. Don't ever provide that message. Now, we've all been in the operating room, and because of pubic arch interference, we can't get a needle where it needs to be, and we have to move on. But the answer there is this is not acceptable. This is not good enough. We're going to have later, today, tomorrow, in the future, to talk about how we can prevent this, or at least minimize this from happening. And when it happens, how can we better deal with it? But always protest mediocrity. Consistently enforce standards. Have your standards. And what you're going to be surprised is if you set your standards really high or you set them really low, your team will navigate to where you set them. When I was a young guy looking for jobs, coach had told me that your ultimate success is not going to be due to you. It's going to be due to your boss. And as a young guy, that hurt my feelings, especially coming from a man who was always focused on responsibility. But he went on to explain is that if your boss sets the ceiling really high, you can reach for the stars, you can excel. But if he sets that ceiling low, no matter how good you are, you'll never reach your potential. So set your standards high. You'll be shocked if you ask people for greatness, they do their best to deliver. And consistent actions create consistent results. How many times and how many people do you know that something is important today, but it's not important tomorrow? Be consistent. That's why your philosophy has to be limited in what the scope is. It has to be what's really important for you. Okay. Leaders create leaders. Your job is to lead yourself out of a job. That's obviously what the Navy SEALs did when that leader who left the great team, that team still functioned at a very high level. He had let himself out of a job. They were so good, they were so well prepared that they didn't need him, at least in the short run. Responsibility, pass it on. As you gain more confidence in the people around you, increase their responsibility, let them shine, okay? Push them to be the best they can. Create ownership. We all are in this together, and that's where trusting does come in, that we have to trust each other. I often created ownership with a we versus them. It was we versus the world, if that's what it came down to. But we knew that we could count on one another. We couldn't count on anyone else. Accountability, trust, and you have to lead up and down the chain. If the only person who's leading is your chairman, your department's in trouble. You have to lead from the lowest. We're all leaders to some extent. We all have responsibilities, and you need to foster that. If you're the chairman, if you're the head of a department, that leadership is up and down the chain. Okay, leaders, they must be selfish to be selfless. You have to take care of yourself first. You have to be healthy mentally and physically. You can never help anyone else until you're pleased with yourself. You can't love another unless you love yourself. That's why it's so hard for young people to truly be leaders of large groups, because they're still developing. They're still not happy with what they have accomplished in their career. You will never be successful until you see yourself in others. And that is an unbelievably important quote. You have to develop empathy. As a residency director, if you can't see yourself in that first-year resident who's struggling, you'll never be able to lead that person. You'll never be able to bring that person to the full potential of what they can be. See yourself and others. So culture. Culture is what drives beliefs. It's what drives expectations. This is the most important function of a leader, and that's to establish culture. Culture decides whether our strategy will be effective or not. And culture is not one thing, it's everything. It's everything. Culture is not just, well, we're going to have high culture in the operating room. It's in every aspect of your department. And we must know what we stand for. That's important. How can you buy in, have ownership if you don't know what you stand for? What do you want to be known for? What do you want your department to be known for? And what is our why? People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And I have found it's so much easier to lead, and people respect, learn, and perform better if you take the time to explain why we are doing this. Why are we doing this? When we would have a new hire in our department, the very first day the first day of employment, when I would meet with them in my office, the first thing I would tell them is that you have no opinions here. And boy, would I get some crazy looks. And I would tell them that you don't have any opinions because over the next 3, 6, I don't know, however many months, depending on the complexity of the job, your job is to learn why we do what we do. Our staff is going to tell you that, and to learn everything about why we do what we do because it works. But after you understand why we do it and what we do, I then expect you to come back and tell me what we can do to make it better. But do that. If you know what you stand for, what you want to be known for, what is your why, that gives you a reason. It lets you have the conviction that your work matters, and that is so important. Now, the emotional glue of culture, what holds the culture together? Of course, this sense of identity, who we are, what we do, why we do it. You have to build safety. Safety is the foundation of culture. We always talk about young people, of kids, that a kid can't learn, a kid can't grow to the maximum if he doesn't feel safe. That's also true for adults. We have to feel safe in our workplace. Our job is safe. The people around us care about us. So you have to build that safety. Shared vulnerability. This is communication. This is where communication takes the time and effort to learn about each other, what we've done good, what we've done bad, where we struggled. And it builds a trust that your team knows that everyone is in this together and that we can help one another. This is the machinery of culture. Safety is the foundation, but shared vulnerability is what makes it run. Okay, an established purpose. We talked about that on the last slide. So successful cultures, there's a misconception here that successful cultures are happy-go-lucky communities. Sometimes that's nothing, couldn't be further from the truth. They're energized, they're engaged, they solve hard problems together. They don't believe I have to or I can do this alone. We do it together. We win as a team, we lose as a team. But the outsiders, sometimes it seems like chaos because there are disagreements, there's arguments. Now, HR departments don't like that. But I think that arguments and disagreements are marvelous. I think it's a great way to build camaraderie. It's a great way to build teams. We argue with our spouses, our children, our parents. If you can't argue with the people that you spend 40, 50, 60 hours a week with, there's one of two problems. You either don't believe you have anything to say or you don't respect them. So I think disagreements are a good thing. But successful cultures also have high candor feedback and uncomfortable truth telling. We talked about how important it is to catch others winning and how important that is to build people up. But we all know that there's times we have to talk about hard things. People aren't doing their job. They're not holding up their end of the bargain. And I found that sometimes very good ways to begin these discussions are to say, look, I have very high standards. And I know that you can meet these. And this is why, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Let me say, I believe in you. How often do we tell our team that we believe in them? There are very few phrases that hold more power than I believe in you. And sometimes you might ask somebody, hey, is everything okay? Do you need everything? Are you all right? And sometimes they say no. You say, well, look, here's why I'm asking. But when you come at problems from this direction, you can talk about really difficult things and leave as one because they have an understanding that we're in this together, a sense of belonging to something bigger than themselves. This is one of my favorite slides, and it's something that I talk to young people about all the time. Entitlement and victimization versus commitment and responsibility. And unfortunately, We see much more entitlement and victimization thoughts than what we should or used to. What are you entitled to? You're entitled to every single thing you earn, and you have to earn it every single day. And a victim, you're never a victim unless you allow yourself to be a victim. We should be talking to our teams about commitment and responsibility. You are responsible for every single thing that happens to you, whether you caused it or not, because you're responsible for how you react. And this is what we have to build in our teams, a sense of commitment and responsibility. If you're entitled and a victim, you'll never be happy, you'll never be successful, you'll never be free, you'll be controlled by others. But if you're committed and responsible, you have a chance to reach for the stars. You have a chance to be everything that you can be. So team focus, shifting just a little bit. Clarity is so important. Keep things simple. A fool can make something complex, but it often takes genius to make something simple. Keep it simple. Integrity. You have to demand honesty from your team in all aspects. Vision. Vision's an orderly plan. We've talked about discipline, commitment, motivation. You can't motivate anybody long-term. Motivation comes from within. However, when surrounded by great people, motivation increases. Your mall, at least my mall always told me, you're judged by the company you keep. If you're around great people, you got a chance to be great. Hang out with bums, you'll be a bum. It's that simple. Toughness is something we're going to talk a lot about next week. And optimism, not delusions, but optimism. Optimistic people are more likable and more successful than people who aren't. Now, we all want to get to success. That's the end point here. That's where we want to be. But success is almost always preceded by failure. And I want to just take a minute here to talk a little bit about failure, because younger generations tend to be paralyzed by this fear of failure in comparison to older generations. And there's a whole host of reasons why that's true beyond the scope of today's talk. But it's important that we tell the young people on our staff that failure is not fatal. Okay. Failure doesn't define you, it refines you. It's an opportunity to learn. It's an opportunity to improve. Show me two people, a guy who has a mediocre career and a guy who's had a very successful career. I promise you, the guy who's been very successful has failed many, many more times because he had the courage and the fortitude to pull him or herself up and keep going. So failure is part of success. It's part of that road. Now, people who are successful do a good job of staying in the present. They don't focus on winning, because that's an end result. You focus on the process, the people, the events that get you to success. So what does success demand? Define goals. You have to know where you're going. And there is data to substantiate that what I'm now going to tell you works. But have your team pull out 1, 2, maybe no more than 3 things they'd like to improve over whatever the time period is, whether it's a month, 3 months, 6 months. And on the left side of the paper, put where you are today. On the right side of the paper, put where you want to be at the end of this assessment period. And then in the middle, write in red ink, what do you need to do daily to go from point A to point B? And put that on your desk, hang it in your locker. If you look at it every single day, there's data to substantiate, it makes it more likely that you're going to reach those goals. But you should have defined goals for yourself and your team, and they have to be achievable in a defined period of time. Okay. Continuous scrutiny. You have to have thick skin. You cannot have thin skin to be success. And this requires both internal and external scrutiny. Always be tough on yourself, not to the point where you paralyze yourself, but you always should expect more from yourself than others expect from you. have the fortitude to remain focused. Everybody wants to win. All teams want to be successful. Most of them aren't because they don't have that fortitude to stay focused. There's a concept called pound the rock. Some of you may be familiar with it, but the story is that we have a boulder and it's too big for us to move with the equipment we have. So we give a young guy a sledgehammer and tell him to hit it, and let's break it up into small parts. He hits it, nothing happens. He hits it again, nothing happens. He hits it a third time, nothing happens. He's now hit it 20, 40, 60, 80 times. Not a dent in this rock. Hits it 100 times, nothing happens. On the 101st swing, it splinters into multiple fragments. So what was important? Was it that 101st swing that did the job? Or was it the 100 before that led up to it? Was it a cumulative effect? And think about when you were an undergraduate, how many people were pre-med majors? Oh my God, they were coming out of the woodwork. But how many, as soon as there was a bump in the road, a course didn't quite go the way they wanted, they found a new major? It's tough to remain focused. And consistency. Consistency is the hallmark of excellence. And it's the most difficult thing that we have to do as human beings, is that every day come back. But just think when you purchase something. If you went to Ruth Chris and every other steak that you ordered was suboptimal, you wouldn't go back. It's too expensive. They consistently give us a good product. So last year, when Wayne Butler stepped down, the next week in our team meeting, I asked everyone, what was the most important thing that Wayne brought? And it was the answers that you would expect for those of you who know Wayne. He's hardworking, he's bright, he is helpful. All of the characteristics that he has. And I told him none of those were the most important thing. The most important thing that Wayne brought was consistency. Every single day that he walked through those doors, we all knew what to expect. There were never good days, bad days. They were all consistent. Now, in Wayne's case, that consistency was at an extremely high level, which made it even better. But that's the most important thing that you have to do. So in order to be great, you have to play the game before the game is played. And what this means is I hope that before you go to the operating room, there's concepts of visualization. Do you think about what's happening? Do you think this is how this implant's going to unfold? And this is all the things that may potentially go wrong. And how am I going to deal with those? But you have to be prepared, and you should always play the game before the game comes up. So the road to success, a big misconception is that success is due to hard work. Hard work guarantees nothing. Hard work does not guarantee success. But without hard work, there's no chance for success. All that hard work is the price for admission. But once you're through the door, now you have to do something to distinguish yourself from everybody else. Intense, focused, disciplined, responsible work. You're doing it with a purpose. You don't get to be successful by accident. It's what we do on purpose. Be satisfied being unsatisfied. And I strongly believe it's often less about talent, but more about passion, resiliency, vision, discipline. The road to success is long and hard. I always tell my kids that, that overnight success that you just heard about, that occurred after about 10 years of work. It doesn't happen. So excellence. Excellence is a reflection of habits, and habits breed consistency. Successful people understand the value of habits. Habits bring order, focus. They give us control. They decrease anxiety. They allow us to feel calm and to do what we need to do. Those of you who are football fans, Tony Dungy, who was a head football coach in the NFL, took years before he could get a job. Interviewed for years and years and never got it, and there were all possible reasons why he didn't. But when you looked at the interview process, the general managers of these NFL teams were asking coaches, what do we need to do, or what do you need to do to make this team better? And the answers were, I need better players. We need more money. We need better coaches. We need better facilities. All of the things you would think. They asked Tony Dungy, what are you going to do to make this team better? He said, I'm going to teach them new habits. What? I'm going to teach them new habits. So he finally got a job, head coaching at Tampa Bay, and he took them to the Super Bowl. They were very successful. And basically what his habits taught is that, for instance, on the defensive side of the ball, is that once somebody made a read, all 11 guys had their role and they did what their role told them to do. They stayed in their own lane. They got to the Super Bowl and the Super Bowl was probably too big. And they reverted to their old habits of playing kind of freestyle and they lost. Subsequently, Tony Dungy got a job with the Colts. They made it back to the Super Bowl. They learned their habits well and they won. So excellence is the ability to do simple things, not complex things, at a high level of precision with consistency. That's the important part here. So what are the no's of success? You cannot allow anybody on your team to feel entitled. That'll break up your team almost faster than anything. They cannot be selfish. No character mistakes. And that is not only when they're at work, that's when they're not at work. You can't have someone come in on Monday morning and say, I spent 2 days in jail because I got into a bar fight. That's a character mistake. And that reflects on all of us. And there's no personal agendas. You can't allow people to stab others in the back. We're in this together. We win as a team, we lose as a team. And that's extremely important. Now, let's kind of summarize this. And we've talked a lot about leadership, but in the last few minutes, remember 4 C's, and this will help you get started. And that is commitment, clarity. Nobody should ever walk out of a meeting. None of your people should ever say, God, did he or she tell us to do A or B? What did they say? Be clear. Have clear directives. Consistency, the most difficult thing that you ever have to accomplish as an individual, and even more so as a team, because you're balancing so many other people. And you have to be caring. If people don't care how much you know, do they know how much you care? And that takes time. So leaders, gain strength as we go, but live a simple life. Don't make this complex. Life is not complex. It comes down to simple things. Lift others with a kind word or deed. We underestimate how much influence we have on others, including people we don't even know. There's data to show that if you smile at a stranger, you get this serotonin burst in your brain of feeling good. The person you smiled at, even if they don't smile back, they have the same biochemical response. Lift others with a kind word or deed. Make sure as you climb, you lift. No matter what you do, as you're climbing that mountain of success, bring others with you. If you get to the top of the mountain, if you get to be wherever your dream is, whether that's a chairman of the department or the president of Astro or the CEO of Ford, whatever it may be, if you get there and you look around and no one's with you, you fail. Bring others with you. As you climb, you must leave. You must leave. As you climb, you must lift. Always be true to yourself. And that means there's times you're going to have to make decisions you don't like. If your institution, your bosses go in a direction that you can't live with, not a disagreement, but a major philosophical difference, be true to yourself, because you can't help others if you're not true to yourself. You become impotent as a leader. And never, never settle for less than what you can be. Reach for the stars. Always condemn mediocrity. So team builders, again, we've talked about the importance of communication. We've talked about why. We've talked about responsibility, accountability, shared goals. Shared goals results in strength. It gives us purpose. And we need defined endpoints. We have to know where we're going and how we're going to get there. So make your goals that they're attainable in a reasonable amount of time. And encourage your young, especially the young people, to put that table together, that sheet of where you are on the left, where you want to be on the right, and what you have to do in the middle to achieve that. So leaders understand the value of relationship. And everything comes down to that. Leaders lead by serving others. As your career progresses, you're always going to think back on the awards you received, the lectures you got, the first time you got a paper published in a very prestigious journal. But that's not going to be what's important. What's going to be important is the faces that you met along the way. And that's what's going to really be engraved in your heart, nothing other than that. But as a leader, you're also going to have to sometimes deal with things that don't come under what you think your leadership role is. You're going to have people on your team that have other problems. Maybe they're getting a divorce, they have bankruptcy, maybe there's drug issues in the family, and you're going to have to deal with that. And if you run into that, if somebody needs water, give them water. Help people. You can ask why later, but always be available, always be there for your team. And leaders, to wrap this up, have to protect and project. What do I mean by that? You have to protect your team. Protect your team from outside forces. Never allow an administrator or another physician to dictate to your team. That's your team. They're not part of that. Do you provide them and make sure they have the appropriate infrastructure? If the salary structure is not right, do you go to HR and fight for that? You have to protect your people. And then you have to project your people. If you're doing a study, there may be a young person in your department. You don't really need them to complete it, but give them a project. Give them a small project so they can be part of it, so they can understand, and they'll build and grow off of that. If you get invited to give a lecture for an abstract, do you do it, or do you let one of the younger people do it? Project your team. If you're unwilling to protect and project your team, you're not a leader. And if you're unable, for outside reasons, to protect and project your team, you must leave, because you're not of any help to them, and all that you can do is drag down. So success has a narrow door. I believe that we can do this. I know that we can do this. I know that we can make brachytherapy relevant and a very important treatment in the prostate cancer armamentarium. But we have to be bold. We have to be courageous. We have to not worry about failure. We have to work smart together and as one, because success has a narrow door. And in order to get through it, we must be together. It's been my honor and pleasure to speak with everyone this evening. I look forward to next week, where we'll talk about team, concepts of team building, of burnout, of things along those lines. And I'll be happy to answer any questions that any of you may have. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was really wonderful. Great thoughts. And I think such a fantastic way of thinking about our decisions and our functions and our teams.
Thank you. So one of the things I always tell people, if you give a lecture, if you meet with your staff, if you have to talk about something hard and no one has any questions, that shared vulnerability doesn't exist. So I guess we're not getting anything. And one of the reasons that people are often afraid in team meetings to speak up is because they think, oh, people think I'm dumb. They'll think it's a stupid question. There isn't any. We're in this together. We win together, we lose together. Okay.
Yeah.
If anybody has questions later, please feel free to contact me, Dr. Klopp. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening.
Thank you so much. We'll look forward to part 2.
Thank you. Bye now.